Hi, Robbie here, and today we are going to talk about a very polarizing camera. A lot of people say that it is simply the greatest camera of them all. A lot of people hate it. We are going to talk about the Leica Q3 43. Right, before we begin, I would like to tell you that I am not sponsored by Leica. My opinions are my own opinions. No one gets to see this video before it's uploaded. So yeah, these are purely what I think about this camera. So my first Leica was the Q3 28, the original Q3, which was launched a few years ago. And I was one of those people who actually thought that if they released a 50mm or a 35mm, it would be awesome. 28 is a very, very difficult lens to shoot. It's very wide and, it feels quite uncomfortable when you have to move in closer. It's easier to stand back and do street photography or travel photography. So when Leica announced the Q343, I was quite excited because, well, actually, I've already moved on to the M system, but still, it intrigued me. I really wanted to see what Leica came up with. So what this camera is basically a 60 megapixel camera with a 43mm lens. It's essentially the same one as the old one, the 28mm version, with just a different lens. Is it a better lens? It might be in terms of performance. Yeah, actually it is. Is it miles apart? No. Does it replace the 28? Absolutely not. I still love the 28. Right, so that's just the gist of it. Let's get into the details. So let's talk about build quality. This thing, as per Leica standards, is built really, really well. It's completely made out of metal. It certainly has this premium feel when you pick it up compared to other cameras at a cheaper price point. The buttons, every single one of them feels nice to use. The on and off switch has this tactile feel to it. The dials are nice to turn. Every single button is just well made. The focus ring, the aperture ring, it clicks very well. Even the switch from macro to normal mode, it's really nice. The leatherette, it's gray. I don't like the color, to be honest. I would prefer it to be black like the previous one. This camera is rated at IP52, which means limited weather sealing, which is nice considering the M camera, the M series, doesn't have any weather sealing at all. This camera has a 60 megapixel full frame sensor. And if you consider that, the form factor is actually quite small. The only thing that comes close to my knowledge is a very old Sony, I think it's the X1R or I just forgot the series. Sony cameras are named like princes. So yeah, size is very, very nice considering it's a full frame camera if you compare it to the Fuji X100V or the Ricoh GR3. Those are smaller cameras, but they don't have full frame sensors. This thing has a tilty screen like the old 28, like the previous. I'm going to stop calling the 28 old because it's not that old. Well, yeah, it is, but when it comes to tech. Yep, it has a tilty screen, so it makes shooting a joy. Overhead shots or just lower angles just makes it easier. The quality of the screen as well is quite nice. I believe it's 5.76 million pixels. Is it best one? Probably not, but it's just serviceable, it's usable. And the USB-C port also functions as an audio input port as well. So you can plug in your mics directly or use a dongle if you're using an older microphone without USB-C support. The focus ring is actually quite dampened. It's a bit stiff, and if you can hear that, it's a bit noisy for me for such a premium product. Oh, the way you actually switch from autofocus to manual focus is a tab right under here. So you just click it and it goes to manual focus, and then you throw it back to autofocus that way. The macro to normal mode ring right here is also nicely dampened, and then if you actually look at the scale, it actually changes as you switch from macro to normal mode. The aperturing, it's clicky, intriguing stuff, I know. Just throw it to auto. Auto to manual has this extra resistance to it. This is where it starts getting questionable. I am someone who likes to use these. This is a Moment Cinebloom 10%, and it's quite chunky, it's quite thick. So Leica, in all of their wisdom, decided to make this camera the same size as the 28mm, and they decided to make the hood very, very shallow. So it's impossible for me to use my Moment Cinebloom on this camera with the lens hood. Let me show you. Twist the filter on, attach the hood. Now, it already starts to scrape. This is as far as it goes. This is as far as the hood goes, so it wouldn't stay straight. I am not going to use a camera that looks like this. This is just stupid. So there are two solutions. The first one, I can buy a aftermarket lens hood or a lens hood from Leica that works with filters, which I am not going to do. I have spent thousands of dollars on this camera and I don't want to buy another lens hood. The second solution is just to not use a lens hood at all. And Leica actually supplies this ring which seals the threads. This is how the camera looks when I'm using it. It's not as sexy as using the lens hood, unfortunately. Oh, the lens cap is made out of metal, very, very nicely built. Doesn't interfere with the filter. So yeah, Leica, why? Now the weight of the camera is 750 grams and the weight distribution is very nice. It doesn't feel front heavy despite it having a large lens. I think it has something to do with the camera being made out of quite thick metal. So yeah, it doesn't tend to tilt forward. 750 grams, including the battery, might not sound like a lot, but then if you're lugging this around for hours and hours, it does feel heavy after some time. Or I just need to go to the gym. I mentioned earlier that this thing is rated at IP52. Yes, it's weather sealed, but that you can only take it out on light rain, drizzles. Don't dunk it in a river. Don't try to do underwater photography with this. Yeah, it's just limited weather sealing. It's not better than nothing though. It's still a lot better than my M11, which doesn't have any weather sealing at all. Yeah, I'm taking quite a long time talking about the build quality. If you are paying that amount of money, you want to buy a premium product. Moving on, the grip, the ergonomics of this camera, what it feels like in the hands. I think this camera, it's terrible when it comes to ergonomics. Yeah, you have a recess right here for your thumb. You still feel like you're squeezing the camera instead of just, carrying it around. You can buy aftermarket thumb grips, which goes on your hot shoe, but then the direct flash look is in trend nowadays, so I leave it open. I put a flash there for you. The buttons feels very nice. You have actually 1, 2, 3, and 4 customizable buttons. This is something that I like about this camera. The way you change what the custom buttons do is that you just press it for a bit and it allows you to change what that custom button does. Other cameras where you just have to faff about, go deep inside the menus and all that sort of stuff. So camera manufacturers, copy this. The viewfinder. It's not the best viewfinder that you can find. Leica didn't upgrade the viewfinder. I'm actually quite disappointed with this one. Not really, because I don't really use the viewfinder. The screen is very, very nice. If I'm using this camera, I don't want to have any pressure. So I just point and click, and very, very often I'm just using one hand. I am very seldom in manual focus mode, just sometimes where the camera's autofocus doesn't want to behave itself. The shutter is really quiet. Too quiet in my opinion. It's very well dampened, yeah, you don't feel it. But then I think it's overdone. Me personally, if I'm taking a photograph, I like to feel like I've taken a photograph. I know it sounds stupid, but that's my opinion and that's my preference. So yeah, some of the things that I wish Leica did was to implement a fully articulating screen, because a lot of the time you are taking verticals, especially in today's digital demands. And then I wish they added an ISO dial right here, like the M cameras. It's asking for a lot, I know, but then yeah, you can wish for stuff. The lens is amazing. It's a 43mm apo summicron. What apo means again is that it has some magic dust inside or some wizardry that cuts down on chromatic aberrations. Although wide open, you sometimes can still see some CA. So I don't know if the apo moniker on the lens is right, but yeah, it certainly performs better than the 28mm. It's a lot sharper as well. 16 megapixels gives you a lot of freedom when you're cropping. In fact, this camera has different modes. It has the 43mm mode, 60mm crop, 75, 90, 120, and finally 150. You still get the full image when you're importing your RAWs from your camera, but the JPEGs are already cropped, so you want to keep that in mind. And then you get Leica's triple resolution technology as well. So if you're shooting at the highest size, it's 60 megapixels. You change it to MDNG, it shoots 36, the smallest one being 18 megapixels. It's supposed to improve dynamic range. It's supposed to lower noise as well. It uses technology called pixel binning. It works on the 28mm, it also works on the 43mm because it's the same camera. But unfortunately, I don't see a difference when I'm using that mode on the M11. So yeah, it's really weird. I think it's a firmware issue, so Leica, please work on the M11. Thank you. The images coming from this camera has very, very nice dynamic range. You can easily recover highlights or shadows. When you're shooting digital, you want to underexpose, but you have a large headroom when you recover shadows. So yeah, you wouldn't have any problems with it. The RAW files respond very well to editing. Again, the lens, it's very, very sharp. It is an f2 lens though. It's a summicron, it's not a Summilux. The 28 goes all the way down to f1.7. This thing goes to f2. Leica could have made it f1.4 or f1.7, but then the size of the lens would be massive. Is f2 enough? Yes, for low light photography. I am actually comfortable cranking up the ISO to 6400. You can easily denoise your pictures in Lightroom nowadays anyway. 43mm focal length, you still get a decent amount of compression as well. Speaking of compression, when you're shooting at 150, 120, 75, you don't increase compression because it's just a digital crop. I've always said that why have that mode when you can actually crop in manually? But I found myself using that feature a lot recently because I just want to look at how the pictures look when I'm punched in. If you switch it to macro, it switches the aperture to a maximum of f2.8. Macro, you really want to stop down anyway, somewhere from f4 to f5.6. By the way, if you're in macro mode, you need to remember to switch back to normal mode or the camera wouldn't focus on something that is further away. So sometimes the camera just doesn't want to take pictures because you're in between modes. You're neither in normal mode or macro mode, but then they give you a notification on the camera reminding you to switch to make up your mind basically whether you want to shoot macro or do you want to shoot normal mode. It takes 8K video. I've never taken a single video from this camera, so yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. I heard that it's acceptable. I heard that it's usable. Right, what are the cons when it comes to image quality? 60 megapixels, again, 60 megapixels. You need a steadier hand when you're shooting 16 megapixels. It's more demanding, it's more detailed, so much detail that if you give it a little bit of a shake, it comes out slightly blurred. So yeah, I like to use it in MDNG, which is 36 megapixels. 60 megapixels as well, it takes up a lot of space. Right, when it comes to RAWs, I tend to tone down the contrast quite a lot on this camera, even with the Cinebloom filter on. It's just the Leica look. It's just the modern Leica look that gives you punchy and contrasty colors. So if you like that, this is the perfect camera for you. Oh, by the way, all of the pictures that you see in this video are edited using my presets pack, Shinwa available in the link below or the link up there. What are my final thoughts on this camera? It's amazing. It's great. It's awesome. It's probably one of the best cameras that you can buy on the market. Do I like it? Absolutely not. It's just not my camera. If I'm going for the Leica experience, which people keep raving on about, I would go for a Leica an M10 and M11, not a Leica Q3. But if you're on the market for a luxury travel camera, this is it. It's very, very expensive, so I can't really recommend this to anyone at all. In fact, I always recommend the Fuji X105 or the 106 when the prices are reasonable, or the Ricoh GR3 rather than this camera. Again, if you're looking for a luxury item, this is it.